It's time for the Rider Dynasty podcast. Let's go! Welcome to the Rider Dynasty podcast with Ryan Bickerstaff, JJ Wenner, and your host, Michael Kloss.
You lucky dogs, you are listening to the Rider Dynasty podcast. I'm so excited for this show as we wrap up the NFC in our division previews. I'm also, as always, lucky to have two guys on my side that are always have my back. Say hello to JJ Wenner. How's it going?
Oh, hi, Mark.
That's the worst movie of all time, I think, on IMDb. The Room. Again, watch the YouTube clips of just people breaking it down. So now Ryan Bickerstaff is also here, and I'm really, really, really hoping for just a dynamic movie quote. Are you gonna come through for me, Ryan?
I did not. I'm sorry.
But you're honest, and I love that about you. You're just like, Michael, don't make me say that crap. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind was from Scarface, and this is a family podcast.
Say hello to my real friend.
Let's go with that one.
I filled it in for you. There you go. It was such an exciting show today. We're wrapping up, like I said, our NFC division previews with what are we looking at, Ryan? You want to give us a recap here? The NFC.
Yeah, we're going under the hood in the NFC West today.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're going to discuss again, as you guys know, all of the fantasy relevant players, and each of us are going to highlight one rising star, one fading star, and one sleeper on each team.
We hope that you're used to the rigmarole by now. Of course, you can find all the latest content that we have on RiderDynasty.com. You can also find us on Twitter and have a conversation with us. That is at Ride or Dynasty. So give us a follow there. Ask us some questions. Again, we'll have a range of answers for anything you want. Really, please. We'd love to hear it. So let's begin as we've done so far in the past with all our other division previews, and we'll continue with the NFC West looking under the hood. Ryan, you've kind of started us off each time, so I would love for you to kind of give us a little quick poll of what you think is going to be a winner and a loser in that division.
All right. My winner, I'm going with the Seattle Seahawks. I see the LA Rams kind of suffering a Super Bowl hangover. We saw the Atlanta Falcons go through it last year. It happens. It happens to the best teams. And Seattle has one of the best quarterbacks in the game, a really strong backfield, and good defense. And then my loser is the Arizona Cardinals. I think their future is bright, but they're just too young right now. They're not going to put it all together this year.
I have to agree with you. I have the Cardinals in last place, although I do think that Seattle is not going to have a great year. My division champs are the LA Rams. I think that their system works well against every team except the New England Patriots. So they will repeat as division champs this year.
I'm going to continue to give Sean McVay all the credit here. Obviously, the players deserve it too, but his scheming is going to lead the Rams to another division title. I was this close, putting my fingers very close together here, with putting the 49ers as last place, but I think I finally settled on the Arizona Cardinals and some growing pains to finish last place. So what we would actually like to start with is, even though all three of us picked the Cardinals to finish last in the division, they're still a pretty polarizing team, especially with the addition of one Kyler Murray. JJ, he's been a hot topic this offseason. He was the 101 in Superflex leagues. He is a dual threat quarterback, and he's still going to be on the fantasy radar and maybe even on a couple championship teams.
Absolutely. I actually want to pass to Ryan, let him go first on Kyler Murray.
Please do.
So Kyler Murray, I feel like he was born to play in Cliff Kingsbury's system at the NFL level. It almost just seems too good to be true. It's like Kingsbury had those comments years ago, last year he made the comments, at least, that he would take Kyler first overall in the draft, and lo and behold, it happened. I don't think the question is whether Kyler has the talent, but whether that system's going to translate well to the NFL. But as we've seen the air raid becoming more and more incorporated into the pro game, I think that it is going to work out. At the very least, defenses are not going to know how to plan for it or compensate for those like quick hit passes. And, you have Kyler Murray. I saw a video on Twitter, I think it was yesterday, of Kyler Murray and Andy Isabella. They were racing each other, and they're neck and neck. So you have a quarterback that runs a 4.3 40, basically. And he's such a unique weapon. And I don't really see any way he doesn't succeed in the NFL, especially with the system that they're building around him.
Yeah, I have to agree. Kyler Murray is my rising star. Ryan, my only issue is that this team gave up 52 sacks last year. Josh Rosen was beat up from the feet up, tore up from the floor up, however you want to say it. And I don't know if they don't improve their offensive line play, if Kyler Murray can survive that type of beating. So, that being said, the only way they don't succeed is if they can't protect Kyler. If they can protect him, I have him ranked as QB 19, which is a very high ranking if you think that Josh Rosen on this team last year was the 33rd ranked QB out of 32 teams. So,
wow.
I'm excited for them. I'm excited for Kyler. I'm just not sure what's going to happen with that offensive line.
That's a legitimate question. Like kind of looking at some of the rankings that we have, and putting it just kind of all together. I've got Kyler Murray actually at 14 on my list. That's higher than I've got Jameis Winston, who in the last podcast I just showed so much love for. Drew Brees, looking at Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford. I'm willing to take a gamble, I think. Again, especially just in most leagues where, the running quarterbacks are just hold even more value. He throws a really good deep ball too. So I'm really excited to see what he can do, but I didn't rank him that high as some kind of fluke. I'm expecting him to produce in that spot. I know Baker Mayfield was thrust into the lineup after a Tyrod injury. What was it, week 3? I think that was against the Jets. If you can remember back, JJ, you're probably watching that game.
I can.
But yeah, Kyler's going to start from the get-go, and I'm going to talk about a couple other players a little bit later on. Again, Cliff Kingsbury's air raid offense. It fits well, and he's a mobile quarterback if he can stay on his feet.
So what do we think about the running backs? What do we think about David Johnson?
I was a really big fan of David Johnson's when he was coming out of college. I would like him more if he had a better offensive line blocking ahead of him. We saw what he did last year. He still had a really good season, especially from a fantasy standpoint.
After Mike McCoy was fired. Let's make sure that we make that distinction, because David Johnson, if you look at a running chart with McCoy, was up the middle, up the middle, up the middle. And that's not necessarily his strength. Once they started booting him to the outside, he had a great second half, and there's no reason to expect that a full year with Byron Leftwich, can actually bring him back, not just to fantasy relevance, but to a top 5 finish. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I'm not gonna disagree with you with David Johnson's usage. The only thing that concerns me, and you guys can tell me if I'm off on this, is that he is 27 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's an older back. Are we worried at all about his longevity at this point?
I don't know. When a running back gets to his late 20s like that, I'm kind of looking for more youth. But David Johnson, he had that year where he hurt his wrist, he sat out, so he came back in on fresh legs. He entered the NFL. I think he was 23, almost 24, I think. So I think he has a little bit more tread left on the tires than most 27-year-old running backs would at this point in their careers. But age is always it's always a risky thing when it comes to running backs, especially because that drop-off can be so drastic.
Absolutely. And if there is a drop-off, I know Kingsbury has talked a lot about a special role that he has in mind for Chase Edmonds. Do we see anything coming out of him this year?
I actually own him, but that's kind of only as, the backup to see what happens with David Johnson. I kind of wanted to make this point, especially even after I kind of almost talked up David Johnson. I would be looking to sell him this year, especially this offseason. I think that a lot of people are expecting big things from the Cardinals offense, but I would absolutely take, a stud wide receiver and maybe an up-and-coming running back, or maybe even like a rookie at the minimum for David Johnson right now. I think that, again, now would be the time to sell, because next year especially, and I hate to say it at his age, but this is where we start to see, running backs after 30 just absolutely lose it. You mentioned last podcast that you're looking at a 3-year window, JJ. And again, I've been trying to take those words to heart here. If I'm really thinking of only having DJ for only 3 more years, I'd rather bank on someone else while I still have top 5, top 10 potential. So to answer your question about Chase Edmonds, no. Only we're looking at injury as a maybe an upper level handcuff, because that's all they have. But I'm actually looking to sell DJ right now. What is that crazy?
No, I actually kind of agree. I had an opportunity to draft David Johnson in my newest startup, our Rider Dynasty League, actually, and I passed on him for Joe Mixon. He's only going to be 23 this year. I think that he can still continue to get better. Whereas David Johnson, he's in his late 20s now. He's going to be on the tail end of his career sooner than later.
Yeah, I have no issue drafting David Johnson. I'm going a 0 running back approach in our draft, which is the only reason why I didn't. I have him finishing as running back 6 this year. So I see no issue with him, especially in this offense, performing for the next 3 years.
So let's look at the wide receivers. I know that Arizona, again, did take, in our opinion, not to put words in anybody's mouth, but 2 highly regarded wide receivers in Hakeem Butler and Andy Isabella. Obviously, I think it's important, Ryan, that you're looking at Larry Fitzgerald. Is he still viable? Because he was in your Old Yeller segment, and you guys got a chance to discuss him. What do you have to say, again, just a recap on Larry Fitzgerald?
I really like Larry Fitzgerald still. Last year, it was just a bad year for the Cardinals. Like, that offense was horrible. He dealt with injuries, and he still had over 700 receiving yards. I mean, the guy is amazing. He's going to be 36 this year. I was doing some research the other day, and because I was trying to look for, because I said something on that Old Yellers segment that I said Larry Fitzgerald could see 1,000 receiving yards. And, as the weeks have gone by, I've kind of been like, oof, was that a little crazy for me to say? So I started to do some research to find, some kind of precedent where a receiver in his mid-30s like this can have like a late career renaissance. And the player I found is the player that Fitzgerald happens to be chasing in the record books, and that's Jerry Rice, who had 6 seasons of 800 or more yards after the age of 36. He went 3 times over 1,100, but one of those years is actually a 1,200-yard season, and that was when he was 40. I'm not saying that Larry Fitzgerald's going to do that, but if we're comparing all-time greats to all-time greats here, Larry Fitzgerald still has something left in the tank. He might not finish out his career in Arizona, just like we saw Rice leave San Francisco, but I don't think he's done yet. I really don't. And I'm not willing to bet against him.
Yeah, I don't blame you for not betting against him. I wouldn't bet anything against Larry Fitzgerald. I think he is a class act. Or at least has been in the second half of his career. And I think he can still play a few years if he leaves Arizona. I am so scared that he's going to end up as a Patriot and score 80 touchdowns and just continue the pain of being a Jets fan.
I would like to stop for a moment and take this time to pen a love letter to Christian Kirk. So if you guys would just maybe get a beer, relax, turn on some wonderful music. As I talk to you, Christian, I just want to reach out. I hope you hear this because I'm extremely high on you. As a matter of fact, one could probably say that I love you for this current season. And I don't think that word love is too strong here, As you guys laugh in the background of this love letter that I have to Christian Kirk, in all seriousness, a broken foot sidelined his season. I know that he had, some setbacks with, trying to deal with Sam Bradford last year, Josh Rosen, and then an offense that only ran somewhere in the neighborhood of 900 plays on the season, which was the lowest in the NFL. This new offense, I think, is really going to help Christian Kirk. Obviously, we talked about Kyler Murray. I think that you've got a big step coming. I read that he had a 13% target share of the offense, again, with Josh Rosen and Sam Bradford. That has the factor into it of those games that he missed, because he played 12, right? The other stat I read was Josh Gordon played 12 games last year, and his target share was almost a full percentage lower. So if Larry goes down a little bit, which I'm personally anticipating, and Kirk goes up, he can be a deep threat. He can be the wide receiver 1-2, borderline. I'd say he's the wide receiver 1. I just see his targets going up, his receptions going up, and everything I like about Christian Kirk. I know we've all kind of had a little bit of our fun takes. Ryan, you love DJ Moore. I just absolutely am head over heels over some players. Like we talked about Kenny Golladay and Christian Kirk looking to make their step up in 2019. Signed, Michael. That was my letter.
I am not a man to come between a fantasy football player and his love. So I support you. Good for you.
He's all mine.
Good for you. He's all yours. I'm a big fan, and actually my sleeper for this team is Hakeem Butler. I know he was a disappointment for a lot of draftniks because he fell to the fourth round, which hurts his overall potential. But he landed on a team that's going to throw the ball more than any other team in the NFL this season. I have them at 650 attempts this year. And even as the fourth wide receiver, I have Butler getting 64 targets. Mm-hmm. And with his size and speed, he can turn those targets into a really solid rookie outing. I mean, he may end up fourth on the team in targets, but now's the time to get him before he starts gaining value, and especially if Larry leaves this season, after this season.
Yeah, I have to agree. I also have Hakeem Butler down as my sleeper. He just looks the part of a receiver one. I mean, he's 6'5", 6'6", close to 230, runs a 4.4. I mean, the guy's a freak athlete. He just looks the part of that wide receiver one, red zone threat. Just chuck the ball up, he'll come down with it. Maybe it might not be this year, but I really like Hakeem Butler's prospects for the future. I think he's going to end up being a really, really good player.
Yeah, finished among the nation's top 10 in receiving yards, 1,300, and yards per reception, 22. Led Iowa State with 60 receptions. He is a solid athlete, like you're saying.
Yeah, and let's not forget Andy Isabella, who I was also very high on. And he's landed on the perfect team, too, to display his talents. I can see Andy Isabella being one of the better rookie wide receivers for fantasy this year.
Yeah, we've talked about him in the past, about struggling with some press coverage. Again, his time at UMass, he set all kinds of records. I need to see him first. I've watched some tape. I like what I've seen. I need to see him in the NFL first. I hope that's not too much of a stretch. I think that, again, he's in startup drafts. In one league, he went in the first round. In another league, he went in the mid-second. So I think that you're still within your rights if you're looking anytime between the end of the first, early second, and before the end of the second, that you can take the risk there if you're still doing startups.
And you meant in rookie drafts.
Rookie drafts, yes. Yes, rookie drafts.
Okay.
Thanks for clarifying.
Absolutely.
First round startups, that would be crazy.
That would be crazy. I tend to agree with you. I'm a little bit nervous about his ability to get off the line, but in an air raid offense, he can be schemed open. He can be put as a slot receiver, which takes him off the line. So I think Cliff Kingsbury is going to be able to get him open pretty easily, which is going to play into what Andy Isabella does best. But are there any other wide receivers on this team that are of any interest to you guys?
Not
the
really.
The name Kevin White makes me interested. I don't want him on my team. I want to point out that he is on Arizona and that he was a first round pick, right? So
I think he was top 5 actually, or top 6.
I'm just maybe into final rounds of a best ball, but yeah, I guess that's too far gone. At least that we, you know what, we're just going to bring up that Kevin White is on the Arizona Cardinals, and you should know that.
Yeah, and the only other guy who I have any interest in as a late flyer is Keyshawn Johnson. As a Jets fan, I love the name Keyshawn Johnson. I miss Keyshawn Johnson. He brought a lot of flair to the league back in the day, and I've heard good things about this kid, so keep an eye on him. If you have a late draft pick in a deep draft, pick him up.
And then we are all in agreement that we're fading, literally all three of us are fading any Arizona tight end.
Absolutely. So if a tree falls in a desert, does it make a sound? I mean,
Are trees in the desert?
Okay, you're right. Maybe a cactus. If a cactus falls in a desert, you son of a gun. All right. So I know that Ricky Seals-Jones was coached by Kingsbury in college, but that doesn't suddenly make him a good tight end. He was an okay pass blocker, but he was a really bad run blocker last year. PFF graded him at 50.5, which is horrible. And as a receiver, Ricky Seals-Jones has flippers for hands. He caught under 50% of his targets. That was the third worst on the team, like including all scrubs. So PFF ranked him as 54.3 as a receiver. So if you can't catch the ball, right, how can you be a good tight end? The Cardinals signed Max Williams and Charles Clay, both of whom are better than Seal.
I'd agree.
I just think it's funny that a guy named Seals-Jones has flippers for hands.
Well, that's why I said it.
Yes!
It wasn't by accident.
You got it. All right. Well, I don't know, again, if they're even worth talking about. So, Ryan, why don't you recap your list here?
All right. Rising on Kyler Murray, fading any Arizona tight end, and sleeper is Hakeem Butler.
Rising stars, Kyler Murray. Oh, my word. Do I agree with Ryan?
Wow.
You have to change your take this instant.
No, it's too late now. Rising stars, Kyler Murray, fading all the tight ends, and sleeper is Hakeem Butler. You must have copied my show notes.
Christian Kirk, call me, tweet me at Michael S. Kloss.
Slide into his DM.
Oh, slide. You just slide away, buddy. Fading any Arizona tight end. And then I also am fairly high as a sleeper on Hakeem Butler. So we've got the NFC representative of the Super Bowl coming up. Just kind of mess the bed there, but still looking for a fairly good rebound. Is Jared Goff going to make maybe not the next step, but is he going to continue what his ascension from last year? Because I think he will.
I think he is going to plateau. I think he had a great year last year. I can't see him necessarily making any huge step, maybe like a little baby step up as he gets Cooper Kupp back for the full year. As he adds a weapon like Darrell Henderson, I think maybe he can get a little bit better. But I think he sort of has hit his ceiling.
I'm actually kind of in agreement with that. I think Goff, which there's nothing wrong with that. If your quarterback's going to get you over 4,000 yards and around, 30 plus touchdowns, you can't complain, really. I mean, he's shown that he can get your team to the quarterback. Goff's not going anywhere. He's going to be a good quarterback for a very long time.
Yeah, the only reason I kind of say that, or at least I will say that he's going to take or maybe even be better, is just because we've talked about Brandon Cooks before, and I don't want to, again, jump the gun, but we've talked about Brandon Cooks, how he's produced. He's kind of averaged around like the wide receiver 13 is his career with the several finishes, even on multiple teams. We're anticipating, at least I am, Robert Woods, being a strong wide receiver 2 in fantasy, so at least top 24. And then I have high expectations for Cooper Kupp too. So I think, again, he's going to have to support all three. Those numbers have to be there. Moving along to the running backs, we've gone ad nauseum, talking about Todd Gurley and Ryan. When push comes to shove, and I know that the two of you would love to talk about Darrell Henderson. Todd Gurley is, again, if his knee is okay, he's a high draft pick, but we don't know yet. I know that Jeff Fisher recently came in on, the NFL Network because, or wherever he's working, because somebody actually hired Jeff Fisher. And he said he didn't understand, why a trainer was talking whatsoever in the media, and that it wasn't a concern when they drafted him, and that he doesn't think that there's a change. Obviously, he was not around the team last year during that playoff run when Todd Gurley, rode the pine a lot, and C.J. Anderson got a lot of playing time. I recently took him in the startup in the 3rd round, which I thought was a value, but I am JJ. I'm pretty nervous, and I think that I could have a season that might hinge on that knee here.
Yeah, I have nothing but good wishes for Todd Gurley. I hope his knee is fine, but I definitely see his workload being reduced. He received so many carries last year. I don't have them right in front of me. Ryan, what are they? 256, 81 targets. He was the player on that team, and I think after several years of that, it sort of wore him down. So I think his ended by the addition of somebody like Johnson, by a player like Malcolm Brown, who I'm actually picking as my sleeper this year for this team. They were all set to let Malcolm Brown leave until the news hit about Todd Gurley. And Ryan, your Lions signed him to an offer, and then the Rams matched it. They wouldn't have done that if they weren't going to use him. I know Henderson is going to be utilized as a weapon, like the human joystick Tariq Cohen. But look for Brown to really pick up a bulk of those carries that they're taking away from Todd Gurley to give him some healing time during a game.
The crazy thing about Gurley, before that you answered that, Ryan, is that he only had 23 less carries than the year before, and it felt like he sat out because everybody remembers the playoffs, right? I'm just really interested to see what his usage is upcoming this year.
He's definitely going to see less carries. He's going to see just less play time in general, especially with the depth at running back they have. It's going to be hard to keep Brown and Henderson off the field. I really like Henderson a lot. He was one of my favorite running backs coming in with this rookie class. He's just a big play threat. He's so fast, and he's a threat to take it to the house anytime he gets his hand on the ball. And I'm looking. He's my sleeper for this season, and I think he can have a very big year as a backup, more gadget kind of player. Gurley's, I think his knee's going to be fine as long as they limit his usage. As long as they're not running him ragged, Gurley's going to hold up for, at least a few more years.
Michael, what do you think about Darrell Henderson?
I love him. I know that there's been talk about using him in a Alvin Kamara-like role, and when you reference that name, you're talking about the Alvin Kamara of 2 years ago. If that's the usage of Darrell Henderson, who I actually own him in a different league that I don't own Gurley in, I'm excited about that. I said, just take the pressure off Gurley. There's just so much talk in the season that we have to, you can hedge your bets there. Why it's why I took him in the late 3rd round. We're talking about Todd Gurley here, that I felt that was the value that I could jump on him there, but I'm very well probably be taking Darrell Henderson later just to hedge my bets there. Like Ryan said, a star out of Memphis. He's going to see some usage.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, looking at the wide receivers, my rising star, and he's not rising anymore. So again, like usual, he's a risen star for me, is Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks is only 25 years old. I thought for sure he was older than that.
It feels like he's been around forever.
I know, but he's 25. He's averaged over 70 catches, 1,000 yards, and 6 TDs since he entered the league. I mean, has he been traded twice? Yes. Has he seemed to finally found his home? Yes. So I think we can expect just another ordinary, like outstanding year from him. I don't have him finishing as a wide receiver 1. I have him and Robert Woods both finishing as wide receiver 2s this year. So I have Cooks at 21 and Woods at 24 overall.
To piggyback off of you on Woods, last year in terms of targets, in terms of receptions, in terms of yards, Robert Woods had his best year, and that doesn't surprise me. Like I said, a borderline wide receiver 1, definitely wide receiver 2. I don't expect that maybe exact thing to happen. Only 6 touchdowns last year. I could definitely see that number rising, which is kind of why I put him as the rising star. No matter what happens with the running back situation, this is going to be, in my opinion, a revenge season for the Super Bowl. You put a stinker up in that game, it's going to be a stat bonanza. And Robert Woods, I've kind of gone on record saying I think Cooper Kupp is still the wide receiver 1, like best friends with Jared Goff. Robert Woods is going to be about as solid as they come. I have him as my rising star. Ryan, who do you like in this wide receiver mix?
I'm going to go with a different guy than both of you. Cooper Kupp, he's my rising star. He has great chemistry with Goff, as you said, Michael. And Jared Goff, my main concern with Goff is how badly he fell apart without Cooper Kupp last year. That offense took such a step down. Cooper Kupp is that good of a player, and we haven't seen him at full go yet. He was on pace for over 1,100 yards last year, 10, 11 touchdowns after a really strong rookie campaign. Tears the ACL. I think he comes back in 2019. He's going to have the chemistry with his quarterback. He is going to be the go-to guy. He's that Johnny on the spot, just, right there when you need him to make the tough catch. And what more could you possibly want in a wide receiver? So the Rams are going to have the best, at least wide receiver trio in the league this year between Kupp, Woods, and Cooks.
Without doubt.
I mean, all 3 of those guys could see 1,000 yards or more. And 8 touchdowns. I mean, it's just insane the kind of production that offense is going to be putting out. But I mean, outside of those 3 guys, I don't really see much else on this roster that.
See, I want a piece of Josh Reynolds.
Really?
I have no problem putting him deep into my bench just because I want any piece of stock in this offense if there are any injuries whatsoever. Again, we saw Josh Reynolds being decently productive. I don't know that you could depend on him as a any more than a deeper flex, but absolutely bring on all comers of Chiefs and Rams to me. I'll take them all. I don't know if I could say the same about the tight ends.
Yeah, I'm not even. Do we even need to cover the Rams tight ends?
No, in fact, I faded Eric Weddle. I went to the safety position only because I didn't want to talk about the tight ends on this team.
Yeah, and I actually faded.
They just don't need him.
I went a little rogue too. I faded Andrew Whitworth, just because I think if he isn't playing at the same level he has been, this whole offense takes a step back. Without Whitworth, Goff's going to be under a lot more pressure, and that's just going to throw things out of whack for them because they don't.
All right, let's recap.
All right, Cooper Kupp is rising. Andrew Whitworth is fading, but hopefully not. And my sleeper is Darrell Henderson.
All right. I have Brandon Cooks as my rising star, Eric Weddle is fading, and my sleeper is Malcolm Brown.
Get one of those Rams wide receivers because I'm rising on Robert Woods. I faded the Rams tight ends Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett, and Darrell Henderson also is my sleeper. Let's take a look at the 49ers. Who'd like to kick that off for us?
I'll go ahead and take it.
I guess I will.
All right, JJ, it's all yours.
Oh, you go ahead.
You guys are too nice. Just one of you take it.
All right, Ryan's going to take this. Go ahead. Give me some Jimmy G
All right,
love.
I don't know how much Jimmy G love you're going to find with me, but I've always been kind of a skeptic on Garoppolo. I like him, but I don't know. I think people really jump the gun a little bit when they're like, "Oh, he's a franchise quarterback. He's so good." All right, he threw for a bunch of yards in what was it, 2017, after he got traded to the 49ers, and yeah, they won a bunch of games. But I mean, he was on pace for 19 touchdowns only, extended over a full season. And then, you go last year, he looked all right in the first few weeks, then he got hurt. And then Nick Mullins came in, and he actually ended up looking pretty good in some games. If you're gonna draft Jimmy G, you might as well go ahead and pick up Nick Mullins because Jimmy's been, Garoppolo, he's been injury prone going back to his days in New England. He just gets hurt. And Mullins, he's not going to win you a lot of games in real life, but I won several games starting Nick Mullins last year in one of my fantasy leagues. So, what do you guys think?
Nick Mullins showed up last year.
Yeah, he did.
I'm not a huge Jimmy G fan. I'm not going to have him on any of my teams. I think he will perform well in a Kyle Shanahan offense, but only because I believe in Kyle Shanahan. I also think that they have a solid group of wide receivers here, but I am really interested to know what we think about the running back situation.
I'm avoiding it completely.
I've gone back and forth. I think having the chutzpah to draft any of them at their ADP in dynasty startups is just not on my list, right? I want to like Jerick McKinnon. I know that everyone loves to talk about his SPARQ score. I know that everyone was high on him. I think that he fits that offense the best. I really am not super impressed with Tevin Coleman. I just honestly don't think he's all that good of a football player. He had the opportunity to take over in Devontae Freeman his stead, and I just don't think that he capitalized. And I don't know that he's really was worth the free agent, money or big signing that you're going to go to. It speaks volumes to me that they signed Tevin Coleman because I felt like Matt Breida was a walking trip to the hospital just because it would seem like he'd get injured every game, come back, get injured again, and then come back and then maybe be out for like the first half of one game. It just seemed crazy to me. Like they need somebody to step up like Ryan. I don't know that I'm willing to play that game. I've actually been, and I hate to admit this because I just, threw this guy through the mud, but I've been a Tevin Coleman owner for the last 3 years, and I've just not been super impressed. He's not somebody that I can really count on. So I have Tevin Coleman because everyone's taken. I'd probably most rather have Jerick McKinnon and just see what he can do based on talent alone from what we saw in Minnesota 2 years ago. JJ, are you feeling it? What are you feeling?
I don't know which way to go in this backfield. My favorite back is Matt Breida, only because, like you said, he had a season-ending injury like 5 times last year. And every time he would just come back on the field and continue to produce. But they signed Tevin Coleman for a reason. But the year before, they signed Jerick McKinnon for a reason. So I have no clue what's going to happen in this backfield. But I do think Tevin Coleman, like if I had to make a guess, I think Tevin Coleman is going to get the bulk of the carries.
Yeah,
So that's where That would be my chip if I had to throw one in on this.
Yeah, I actually like Tevin Coleman. Because now he's paired back up with Kyle Shanahan, who was his offensive coordinator in Atlanta, and he had a really good season with him. So yeah, I really like what Coleman could do in this offense, but you have this weird 3-headed monster, and then don't forget what's his name, Raheem Mostert, was it? He looked good last year too. He averaged over 6 yards a carry, I think. So I mean, you have 4 guys in that backfield that are quality, viable running backs, and it's just too New England-esque. It's just it's very prohibitive. I'm staying away from it.
Yeah, and don't they have, if I'm not mistaken, the fullback, Kyle
Juszczyk.
He sounds like the motorcycle trying to start up in our opening.
It's a Juszczyk.
Juszczyk, there you go. Yeah. But he gets used a lot.
Yes.
So, yeah, I have no clue, man. This is so confusing to me.
Yeah, I actually like their wide receiver situation a lot more than the running backs. And I have Dante Pettis as my rising star. He struggled with some consistency problems. I know he had an injury at one point. He had some really nice games. He had in week 1 with Jimmy Garoppolo, he had over 60 receiving yards. And then he had a few really nice games late in the year too. I think that he's going to kind of blossom into a really good receiver this year. He just looks the part of it. He looks primed for the kind of, maybe not breakout. I'm not loving any of their receivers. I look at them more as like receiver 3 flex options than 1 or 2s. But definitely solid depth players on this receiving core, and they'll be great in spot duty for you.
Yeah, looking at them as a whole, I'm fading every wide receiver who's more than 24 years old.
So
I'm fading Marquise Goodwin. I'm fading Trent Taylor, Jordan Matthews, all of those guys. Now I will say for Marquise Goodwin, in the Ocho Cinco race that's coming up, I'm putting my money on him because he had elite college sprinting background.
Yeah, he's in the Olympics, wasn't he?
For Texas. He was a qualifier, I believe, but
yes,
he is super fast. And you don't lose that. But, yeah, I'm fading all of those older receivers. I love the young guys. I love Pettis. I love Jalen Hurd, Deebo Samuel. Kendrick Bourne did well there last year. They drafted Richie James, who didn't really show up last year, but there's still an opportunity for him. My sleeper on this team is Jalen Hurd. Most of the rookie buzz is going to Deebo Samuel, but I think that the real sleeper is Hurd. He is walking into a situation with plenty of available targets, and he had a great market share in college and a really great athletic profile. He is 6'5" and ran a 4.58 40. He was a former running back. He's great after the catch, but he also performed well on deep targets. He has a 35.5-inch vertical, and he has 10.25-inch hands. He has mitts. And you can see that in his receiving, his catch percentage. He was great. He is going to be the star rookie on this team after this season. I got a lot of this information from Ryan Miller. I was reading some of his tweets. He's at Ryan Miller NFL. He does some of the best in-depth statistical analysis in the business right now. And he does one, it was about a week ago, on his rookie wide receiver model. I highly recommend following him, But after reading that, I am all in on Jalen Hurd.
I'm glad you brought him up, too, because I don't feel like that's been one of the rookies that we've drafted in any of our mocks or we've gotten a chance to talk about. So thank you for doing that. That's a new name for us.
Yeah, and I actually do like Hurd's upside, but I'm going with Deebo Samuel as my sleeper here. I just think they used that high second round draft pick on him for a reason, because he is ready to contribute now. I think he's a very pro ready prospect, and that he can be a really good, solid player right out the gate. And I think he could step into a role where he is the number 2 receiver, at least to start the year, whereas Hurd can be more of one of those like running back receiver hybrid players that's becoming more popular lately in the NFL. I know we talked about Marquise Goodwin already, but I'm fading him. And the note I have next to it is, as Nancy Reagan would tell you, just say no.
You're busting out the old references now. I like it.
His dad must have told him about them.
Got him. I think now also probably moving on maybe too soon because I didn't let that joke marinate enough. Is we have to talk about George Kittle, right? He's my rising star. JJ, he's your rising star. I look at George Kittle. More yards than any tight end in football history last year, and also doing it with Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard, right? I also point out that, his, 873 yards after the catch put him, first among tight ends as well. He was in that position, and he has athleticism to make plays and yards after the catch, like it said. So that's a huge stat. He's rising quickly up my draft board.
I agree. He is a rising star for me as well. Now, just so everybody's aware, he is not going to get the volume he had last year. As an addendum, he is not going to be able to replicate all of the big splash plays that he had.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's no way that defense has let him do that anymore, because that was that big game in Oakland, that huge game in Denver, or against Denver. I'm not sure if it was in Denver or not, but where he just absolutely exploded, and that's going to be a percentage off of his projection there.
Absolutely. But even looking at his catch percentage, I looked at all of his stats from last year, and I had to knock down his yards per target just to get like a reasonable projection for him. And I still have him getting 82 receptions for 1,012 yards and 6 TDs, which puts him 35 points ahead of the number 4 tight end. And he's coming in at number 3 in that upper triumvirate of guys. I don't think you're going to find somebody better than Kittle.
No, target on his back still from defenses, but you still make that pick every day.
Definitely. All right, so just a fun fact. George Kittle had more receiving yards after the catch than all but 3 other tight ends not named George Kittle last year.
Yeah, he broke out. It's crazy.
It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd.
Yeah. Is there anybody else we need to talk about on this team?
I don't think so. Give us a recap, Ryan.
No, I'm ready to move on. All right, 49ers. Dante Pettis is rising. Marquise Goodwin is fading, and Deebo Samuel is your sleeper.
My rising star is George Kittle. I'm fading all wide receivers over the age of 24, and my sleeper is Jalen Hurd.
George Kittle is a riser for me. I'm fading Matt Breida and Tevin Coleman, which also, by the way, Tevin Coleman seems like he runs upright, and maybe that's why I don't like him. But Jerick McKinnon is I qualify as my sleeper. So let's get into Seattle, the Seahawks, and Russell Wilson still leading the charge there, Ryan, at quarterback.
Yes, leading the charge for the 2019 division champions, Seattle Seahawks. Russell Wilson, he's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Definite top 10 in the fantasy realm. He's just consistently great year in, year out. You know he's going to he's going to lead his team to a winning record. There isn't really much to be said about Russell Wilson. He's incredible.
I don't even know what to say. I disagree. I mean, I think, Ryan, that Russell Wilson is a great NFL quarterback. I don't think he's going to be a great fantasy quarterback next year. I think he had an extremely high touchdown percentage, which is going to come back down to earth. And that Brian Schottenheimer offense wants to run the ball. They ran more than they passed last year. And that's going to continue this year. And you can't have a top flight fantasy quarterback on a team that runs more than they pass. It can't happen.
Yeah, he's my fading star. I'm an owner of Russell Wilson in a couple leagues. And I go right back to the want to run the ball. I do think Russell Wilson makes plays. I do think that he's absolutely fantasy relevant. I just don't consider him in the top flight. Again, from what I remember last year at this time, there were many pundits that were, coming off his, the best season of his career, putting him as the number 1 overall quarterback, and how that, how just an offense and how the mighty have fallen of that. Again, as an owner, am I terribly worried? No, I'm not. I know that I'm going to get some great games out of him, and I know that he's a winning quarterback, and I'm happy with that. But I have to disagree with you, Ryan. I don't think that he's a top 10 quarterback anymore, and I don't know that he will be for the rest of his career. Serviceable, winning, but not the stat machine that we were used to a couple of years ago.
Time will tell.
That really, honestly, to keep it moving, brings us to the conundrum at the running back position. Looking at Brian's list, is you have him, I should say, Rashad
Yes.
Penny as your rising star.
Yeah, like you guys said, Seattle wants to pound the rock this year, and people really cooled off about Penny. I feel like he got a lot more hype last year, and they're acting like he didn't need a year to adjust to the NFL. So he has he was beat up a little bit last year, dealt with some injuries. He still had almost 500 total yards and finished with a 4.9 yard per carry average, which is pretty good. He's going to see more carries and more targets in the passing game this year, especially with Mike Davis out in Chicago now. Rashad Penny's I think he's gonna end up being a weekly, at least flex play by the end of the season. I really think he's a first round pick. They're gonna really get him incorporated into that offense now. In year 2, I look for him to have a big year.
Now, Ryan, are you worried at all about Chris Carson?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, Chris Carson's going to get a lot of carries, but I think that they're going to have 2 fantasy-relevant running backs in Seattle. They're going to have, if their MO is going to be they're going to come out pounding the rock, you're going to get a little bit of, thunder and lightning with Carson and Penny. And they're both going to produce.
Okay, yeah, I have Rashad Penny leaper. I think it's time for him to show up or shut up. He's a first-round pick, and he's playing behind a lunch pail guy in Chris Carson. It's time to, really show up and fight for this job. I think with a year under his belt, like you were saying, Ryan, that he's going to be able to start to earn at least an equal share of the carries in this offense with Chris Carson. Right now, I have him basically splitting the carries, taking a little bit less than Carson, but I have him taking 182 carries for 900 yards and 7 TDs. I see him getting about 16 receptions for 130 yards and a TD. But if he is hungry, and I don't mean hungry like Eddie Lacy hungry, I mean, like, I think he'll be able to steal a lot more carries from Carson and easily move into that running back 2 range.
Oh, yeah, and if Penny has the year that you have projected for him, I'm not mad about that if I draft him.
So,
I mean, I guess it depends on where I draft him, but, 9th, 10th round, absolutely.
So if you could choose between the two, you guys are going Penny?
At his price.
At his price?
Yeah.
If they're equally priced, I'm probably going with Chris Carson for this year. I think he's going to get more carries, but in a dynasty league, I would go with Rashad.
So the wide receiver position is extremely interesting in an offense that looks to run, as we've kind of established. My riser right now is Tyler Lockett, and as we've talked about before, it's tough to name a riser that only saw 70 targets last year. I kind of want to look at the quality of those targets, and I think that there's going to be more even with adding, such a beefcake like DK Metcalf. But I mean, Wilson trusts him. I read an interesting stat that said Wilson did not have an interception in any of those 70 targets to Lockett. So again, a year of trust, what you had built up with Doug Baldwin, I think that as you can expect, Lockett had a ton more targets per game than, when Baldwin was on the field. But he didn't drop a pass either, finished second among receivers and catching almost 85% of balls thrown his way. I like, and I'm interested to hear, JJ, what your thought on what Tyler Lockett and maybe projections if you have them. But I do think that there's going to be an increase that way. And when Wilson's forced to throw the ball, and in a lot of situations, where he will be pressed to, it's going to Lockett.
Yeah, I agree with most of what you said. I mean, Petey Sunshine has said all the right things about how he's going to use Lockett, how he loves Lockett. He's going to do all these different things with him. I mean, I've loved Lockett as a player since before he was the post A-Rob reception perception darling, mostly due to Sigmund Bloom and Cecil Lammey talking him up on their podcast. But I'm saying this with peace and love. He will not be a top 10 receiver this year.
And I don't expect him to be either, though. So
all right. So I just want to repeat that for all the listeners. He will not be a top 10 receiver this year. His TD percentage, which is a player's TDs divided by receptions, okay, was 17% last year, which is higher than Calvin Ridley's, which was ridiculous. 7% is considered elite. 5 is good. And he was at 17% last year. All right. Just to give you some sort of, background, something to understand how much of an outlier his season was. So I have him projected for 92 targets for 60 receptions, 937 yards and 5 TDs, which puts him as a borderline wide receiver 2 or 3. And that's where he has lived for most of his career, right in that wide receiver 2 range. He was mostly a little bit lower, and I think he's going to take an uptick as a player this year. He's going to see more targets than his average 72 targets. But just pick him and know what you're picking, because you're not going to get the player from last year.
Yeah,
Was I clear on that?
Perfectly. No, perfectly. And it's like,
Yeah, I think
I have
that's
him
very well
ranked
said.
21 right now. So I've managed expectations. I think that you've just set up to our listeners to manage expectations, but I'm actually pretty happy. Like I said, if I can draft smart, pick maybe like 2 wide receiver ones, I would not mind having him as my either first flex option or a wide receiver 3.
Absolutely.
As a back end wide receiver 2, I'd still take him at his price all day. DK Metcalf is an interesting thought. Both Ryan and I have him as our sleeper. Just presents a more of a big body where you're looking at Lockett skill set to, again, go deep, play the sideline. I'm really interested to see how do you think that they're going to deploy DK Metcalf?
I think that if DK Metcalf just goes out there as is right now, he's a great deep threat. Russell Wilson has a great deep ball. I can see Metcalf just running go routes. But if Metcalf grows as a route runner, I'm saying watch out, because this guy can be a dangerous receiver if he gets better in that department. And but I have him down as my sleeper. I think that Metcalf has a lot of upside, and that he is going to end up being a good player. Maybe in the same vein like as a Tyler Lockett, just like a much bigger, more physically imposing version, where you're running those deep routes, and then you go up, you make the catch, and then you run the guy who's trying to tackle you over. And I see Metcalf doing a lot of that.
This was best case scenario, I think, for DK Metcalf to find a spot on the Seattle Seahawks. Looking at David Moore and Gary Jennings, 2 guys that sound like they should probably be on next week's episode of Jeopardy instead of on an NFL football team. I don't know that I put too much stock in. I know that a lot of people talked about David Moore last year, and he filled in, rather nicely, but just disappeared towards the end of the season. I take a flyer on him.
Yeah, why not? He looked pretty good at times last year. And Gary Jennings, coming out of West Virginia, he's a big play guy. I think he could end up having a pretty nice role in that offense too.
And keep an eye out for John Ursua, the wide receiver out of Hawaii. He has a very good athletic profile. He was also mentioned by Ryan Miller as a guy who is going to hit in the NFL.
So those are the wide receivers that are on our minds. As far as tight ends, JJ, do you have any love for Nick Vannett or Will Dissly?
All right. Can I just say how bad the tight ends are in this division? We have Nick Vannett and Will Dissly. We have Ricky Seals-Jones, flippers, and Charles Clay and Max Williams. We have Gerald Everett and Tyler Higbee. And then Kittle. Like, he's like the king, right? Like the king of the North. I don't know. Is that a Game of Thrones reference? I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
It is. Proud of you.
But, yeah, I have Nick Vannett ranked as my number 16 tight end. Dissly is 36, and I couldn't care less.
I'm not drafting either one.
I'm with you. No, there's no reason, I don't think. And as long as we just make that clear that, again, there's enough love to go around, I think already enough talent on this team that maybe you might get a couple spot starts from one of the two, but not fantasy relevant.
Yeah, they might be all right best ball options, like late in the draft. Like one of those games where, a tight end will go off and have 2 touchdowns, 2 receptions for 2 touchdowns and 8 yards, something like that. But outside of that, no, I'm not messing with either one.
Well, Ryan, as always, and as you have, why don't you give us a quick recap before we sign off here.
All right, Seattle Seahawks. Rashad Penny is rising. I don't have a fading player. It would have been Doug Baldwin, but he, retired. And my sleeper is DK Metcalf.
My rising star is Tyler Lockett. My fading star is all of the tight ends except for George Kittle, who isn't on this team, but I don't even want to say their names. And my sleeper is Rashad Penny.
I was also rising on Tyler Lockett. I'm fading on Russell Wilson, which brings a tear to my eye, but again, not the QB1 we've been talking about in the past. And my sleeper was DK Metcalf. We definitely appreciate you guys all listening to our recap. That's going to close it out, actually, for the NFC. We're excited to get started with the AFC. So, Ryan, why don't you say good night to everyone? JJ, follow it up with one of the most beautiful things that you've ever said. I'll say good night. Thank you very much for listening.
Night, everyone. We'll catch you in the next one.
Michael Kloss, Christian Kirk is waiting for you.
I can't wait.
Boat drinks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Ride or Dynasty podcast. If you have enjoyed the pod, please subscribe and leave us a rating and review on iTunes. Follow the guys on Twitter at Ride or Dynasty. You can follow JJ at JJ Wenner. Ryan is at BixPixFFB. And Michael is at Michael S. Kloss. Check out our website, rideordynasty.com. And remember, we have your back.
Your reputation far exceeds your skills, Mammy.